Hello there, everybody, and welcome to today's L10 webinar, Waking Up the Dead, Using Competitive Sales Simulations to Renew Skill Application, sponsored by Ignite Selling and WLH Consulting. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for L10. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to serve as host of our webinar. I'm going to start here with some housekeeping items, including, most importantly, how you can interact with our panel of speakers today. We are planning about a 60-minute session. We might try to give you a little bit of time back at the end, but hopefully we won't go any longer than that. You'll notice that your phones are on mute. So if you have any questions, and we certainly encourage you to submit any questions you have, please use the questions module on that control panel there on the right side of your screen. You can just type in the question, hit the submit button. We'll ask the questions at the appropriate time throughout today's webinar, or queue it up for Q&A at the end. But again, I always urge everybody to submit any questions or comments as they occur to you while they're fresh in your mind. I also wanted to point out there's a handouts window on the control panel there with some information about some L10 programs. You're certainly welcome to download any or all of those as you like. You can just highlight the title, and we'll guide you through downloading those to your computer. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in the L10 webinar library. We're going to send you a follow-up email about 1 hour after today's webinar ends with a link to the recording. It'll be available even a little sooner than that again through the L10 website. So one way or the other, you'll be able to access that recording and check back for any refreshments and whatnot, or share with colleagues as you'd like. And speaking of following up, as you lead today's webinar, a short follow-up survey is going to appear on a separate browser window. Please do take a moment when you leave today's webinar, look for that survey, and share your thoughts with us. We produce these webinars for you, so of course your feedback is always appreciated. And along those lines, my email address is showing here at the bottom of the screen. I'll also show you during today's webinar. I can help you with anything around our webinars or your L10 membership. Certainly don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to introduce you. We've got a panel of speakers today. I'm going to introduce you to the first of our speakers, and he'll tell you more about who's joined him on today's call. Steve Gilda is the co-founder and managing partner of Ignite Selling. He's also the co-author of Premeditated Selling. He has more than 2 decades in sales performance improvement consulting with Fortune 500 clients. Steve is currently living in Austin, Texas, although I believe he's joining us from beautiful North Carolina today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Steve at this point to get us started. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction. And yes, I am calling you from, I don't know how beautiful North Carolina is going to be today. We are expecting some very serious thunderstorms. So we're going to hope that we don't have any computer glitches here during our thunderstorm. But thank you very much for everybody for joining. I really do appreciate that. Just to continue on, just a little bit about our company, Ignite Selling. We have been in the sales effectiveness space for almost 8 decades of experience in complex sales and sales management, coaching, and strategy. We are the creators of what we call an interactive learning map. In other words, we don't believe that sales training is done through PowerPoint any longer. And we really encourage clients to use the competitive capstone simulations, which, interestingly enough, is what we're going to be spending the majority of our time talking about today. All of our modules are custom designed and customized for our clients, so that clients can either choose to pick either a 2-hour module or maybe a 2-day module, whatever seems to be best for their particular needs. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to help improve performance for over 10,000 salespeople worldwide. One thing I will add to that, we were at a conference, this L10 conference recently, and somebody came up to us and said, you know, Ignite Selling really is the sales integrators of sales training. And I really appreciated what they were saying there, and you'll learn a little bit more about what that means. But in short, really what we try to do is integrate all the sales skills, sales process, and sales knowledge that organizations provide their salespeople and integrate it into a nice, useful way to help drive stronger proficiency and adoption of all those skills. So I thought it was actually pretty well put. So, you know, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is, you know, kind of judge us by the company that we keep. And what you're seeing kind of pop up on the screens are just a few of the clients that we've had the great pleasure of working with. And you see clients ranging anywhere from the healthcare field, which many of you guys are part of today, to professional services, to manufacturing companies, and to financial services. So we're a little bit all over. But I'd say about 60% of our company revenues are working in this healthcare space today. So joining me on this webinar today is a couple of panelists. And the first person I'd like to introduce you to, you're going to hear from her a little later on, is Wendy Heckelman. Wendy is the co-founder and president of WLH Consulting. She has 25 years of consulting experience with Fortune 100 clients. In her specialty area is the pharmaceutical, biotech, and healthcare delivery areas. She has expertise in business and account management, field force sales effectiveness, market access, and large-scale change. You can read the rest about her bio as you see down here about where she got her master's and her PhD, etc. But we're grateful to have Wendy join us. In addition to having Wendy join us, we also have Brian Ferrari. Brian is joining us as an executive sales leader with over 2 decades of healthcare experience. He has an extensive portfolio of driving success through strategic sales efforts and leading healthcare companies such as Hologic, Abbott, Boston Scientific, and Bard. He currently resides in hot, sticky Orlando, Florida, as he shared with us earlier. And then in addition, we also have, we're grateful to have Jason Rock. Jason comes to us as a Senior Director of Channel Strategy at Siemens Healthcare. As a seasoned sales and seasoned sales and marketing executive, a Six Sigma black belt, and he's part of the Fighting Illini University of Illinois, and got his MBA in marketing and organization from here from Case Western University. So I want to just thank all of these folks for joining me on our panelists. You're going to get the opportunity to kind of hear from each of them as we go through our webinar today. Let's kind of start off kind of where are we going, and let me just share with you briefly a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. As I shared with you just a little bit ago, we're really going to be focusing our conversations on the real value and usefulness of using competitive simulations in your sales training. In order for us to do that, we're going to start off with really kind of understanding what's the state of sales training today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what competitive sales simulations are not. And then we'll share with you a little bit about what they are. And then we're going to get into kind of how are they being used. And our panelists are going to be participating in some of their participation, and why should you consider using them. Well, let's go ahead and let's get started kind of on our very first topic, which is the state of sales training today. And this is where we're going to get you guys involved. So this is going to be our first poll. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put up a poll. Tim's going to go ahead and throw this up there, and then we're going to ask him the question: how many sales professionals, how many professional salespeople are there in the world today? So go ahead and take a moment and click. Do you believe that there are less than 4 million salespeople in the world today? Between 4 million and 7 million salespeople in the world today? 8 million? More than 8 million? Or more than 10 million? Take a moment and go ahead and click the box that you believe is most appropriate, that you believe is the right answer. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Tim, let's go ahead and let's take a peek at our results here. So it looks like most of us believe right now, it looks like there's actually, yeah, more than 10 million salespeople in the world today. And actually that is the right answer. But it's interesting that, you know, between 4 million and 7 million or more than $8 million is also pretty good guesses. Let's take a look at this just a little bit further. Let's go back to our slide deck. Let's take a look at some research here. Let's do that. So just in the United States alone, it is estimated through the Bureau of Labor and Statistics there are approximately 14 million professional salespeople today. And these are not, when we say professional salespeople, we're talking about individuals who actually are professional out in the field sales representatives or over the phone. These are not retail salespeople. So these are professional salespeople. Let's take a look at another poll. On the average, how much do you think is spent on training today? So is it less than $500 per rep? Is it between $500 and $1,000 per rep? Between $1,000 and $1,500? Between $1,500 and $2,500, or more than $2,500 per rep? And that is in a given year. How much do you think is actually spent on a given rep in a given year? So we're going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Tim, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the results here from this one. And it looks like the majority of you believe that more than $2,500 per rep. And that really is the right answer. Let's give you some little bit of statistics on that. Let's go back to our presentation if we can, Tim. And let's kind of take a peek at how much is actually being spent. You know, companies today on the aggregate are spending over $21 billion on sales training. When you sit back and you look at that, ATD, the Association of Training and Development, says that the average salesperson, most companies are spending between $4,000 and $5,000 per year on sales training. And there's another statistic there. Okay, yeah, and that also came from IKO. That was kind of validated to that. We have to kind of understand that, you know, the old adage, time is money. 94% of companies today invest in sales training. And what's interesting is that average companies are investing 4 days per year, where top performing companies are investing 6.5 days per year. What we have to really begin thinking about is really, what are we doing with that time? Where are we spending these 4 days or 6.5 days? What are we actually doing? And the interesting thing is, if you think about it, everybody on this call has either been through sales training or leads sales training. And we just are inundated with training, from being competitive knowledge to questioning skills to prospecting skills to new product launch to presentation, business acumen, the list goes on and on. And so we are just inundated. And training is provided in a lot of different modalities, from life skill workshops to leader-led learning, maybe in a regional meeting, to mentoring and field coaching, to self-directed e-learning, to virtual-led learning. We are just inundated as salespeople. And the individuals, if you're part of training, that's your job. Your job is to provide the skills, the knowledge, and the process necessary to help your people be successful. But think about all of the stuff that they have to, that we give to those sales representatives. We have to ask ourselves, you know, how's it going? Well, the unfortunate reality right now is that between 85 and 90% of the people say that sales training is having very little or no lasting impact. And that's just really unacceptable. Now, there's all kinds of studies that have been done out there that simply says, why is this happening? You know, one particular reason, and you guys may have heard about this, is the Ebbinghaus effect, which is the forgetting curve. At L10 this past weekend, we went ahead and, last week, we learned a little bit about that. Actually, Kim, we're getting a little bit of an echo from somebody right now. If we can go ahead and mute the panelists for right now, that would be...
Yeah, if we could mute Cheryl.
Yeah, it looks like Cheryl and maybe Tim might have unmuted. We can go ahead and mute them. Okay. That's helpful.
Thank you.
There you go. That's gone. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But anyway, we have this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which simply just states that, you know, we end up losing majority of what we actually have been taught. You guys have seen this research in the past. If you've been in sales training for any amount of time, you know that somewhere between 85 and 90% of all new information is forgotten within 30 days. And that's not new. So organizations spend a lot of time trying to fight this battle of this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And so we try to provide e-learning. We provide coaching and reinforcement and field follow-up. There's a lot. But we have to ask ourselves, what happens with all of that knowledge? We gave them so much. We helped them try to understand, look at all of the training that we've actually provided. Tim, can you give me control again? There we go. So what actually happens? Look at all of the stuff that we've given them. Where does it all go? Well, the unfortunate reality is that it doesn't go anywhere. We retain this with us as salespeople. It's like like this poor guy riding on this bike. He has everything that he's ever had or everything that he's ever learned, he retains with him. The challenge becomes is, do I really know when to pull out what? When am I supposed to use that value calculator that was provided for me, last year? At what point in time, what questions should I be asking to whom? What about this competitive knowledge? What about the process that I've been taught? What about, this new market knowledge on this new industry or this new buyer type? What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? And when do I use it? So we inundate our salespeople with so much, but we really have to ask ourselves, How effective are they? So here's another poll question for you guys. You think about it just for a moment. All of the training that you've given a sales representative in their first 24 to 36 months with your company. Stop and think just for a moment. Now let's ask this question. How satisfied are you with your team's mastery of all the training that you've given them? Are you dissatisfied? Could they be using those skills, that knowledge, that process better? Are you kind of nonplussed, kind of neutral? They're okay. They could be better. Or are you satisfied? I'm happy with the way that I see, or the assessment that we've done, the data that we have says that, you know what, they're actually using all of the knowledge that we've given them. They're using all of the skills effectively. They know how to follow a process. Where are you? Are you dissatisfied, neutral, or are you satisfied? I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Tim, let's take a peek at what the results are. So most of you guys are kind of neutral. And then, but what's interesting here is that nobody's really satisfied. And I guess that just kind of comes from all of us being kind of in sales or in marketing in some way, where never being satisfied maybe isn't a bad thing. But in this particular case, we have to ask ourselves, if we're spending all of this money, shouldn't we be satisfied with the results that we're getting? Shouldn't we really be expecting our people to drive the knowledge, use the knowledge and the skills and the processes that they have? What are we doing if we're so dissatisfied, or if we're just not kind of neutral about it? Let's kind of hear from our panelists. Let's go back to the slide deck, Tim. Let's kind of hear from our panelists for a moment. So, first question I kind of have for the panelists here is, guys, when you sit back and you think about, with all of the performance improvement efforts that you have been part of, why don't salespeople become as proficient as we need them? Jason, I'm going to kind of come to you first. Think about all the training that you've been part of or been responsible for implementing while you're at Siemens. Why don't you think that salespeople are as proficient as we need them to be?
Yeah, sure, Steve. When I think about proficiency, or look at the gap in what we want as commercial leaders and desire to what we actually see, in my experience, it's one of two things. One, it hasn't been tailored or delivered at the right skill level. So, for example, you've got varying folks in the organization, some very strategic, some relatively novice, that make up your population of salespeople, and the training hasn't been delivered to hit their mark or their education level or experience. Or two, it's really just not been translatable to the type of sale, the environment, or maybe the customer dynamic that they work in and operate in. And my experience with what we've done at Siemens and with Ignite is that it has some translatability, and it kind of moves up and down the different skill levels. So from a simulation perspective, I think there's a bit more staying power, and when you get that, comfort comes, and then you start to see some results. So between the skill level and the translatability to the salesperson environment, those are the two gaps where I see it fall short.
I appreciate your thoughts there, Jason. I think that when you start talking about kind of transferability, it is unfortunate that as much as we as sales training professionals try to make training realistic, is it really ever as close to what they do in the field? And it makes it difficult for them to kind of apply it. So I think that is just a very real insight that I think many of the participants on this call today are facing, is that transferability. How do I actually make that happen? I'd like to come over to Brian next. And Brian, kind of get your thoughts on this. When you sit back and you look at all the performance efforts of all the companies that you've been part of, why do you believe that salespeople really struggle with becoming proficient in the skills and the knowledge that we give them?
Yep. So I think it's important to remember that being a great salesperson, it's hard, right? You're hit with lots of training materials right out of the gates and throughout their careers. And you think about the stuff that the reps have to have to navigate through. It's things, brain sharks, manuals, videos, scripts, and the ever-increasing pile of clinical articles that they have. There's a ton of stuff that they have to absorb and absorb quickly. And then, unfortunately, not everybody becomes as proficient as we need them to be. And I think the success of this, in my mind, begins and ends with three areas. It's having great field sales trainers, right? It's having a great peer-to-peer mentor program to reinforce what great looks like. But more importantly than even those two, it's having great frontline managers that inspect it, that drive it, and to maintain its importance. And, this structured sort of eyes-on approach to training proficiency is just such an important follow-through to our post-training efforts. I'm personally not really super concerned about our best people. They tend to figure this stuff out. Where my concern lies is with our sort of middle-of-the-road people that tend to struggle, and every company has them, right? And how we get our middle to the top faster really makes all the difference between getting a division to their goals and perhaps a division missing their goals. So, I think it's those three areas: great trainers, great managers, etc.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that is clearly part of the answer. I really like what you said about, the challenge about becoming proficient stems from two things. There was two words you said there, and that really was kind of absorption or adoption and speed. Obviously, the faster that they can absorb it, the faster that they can begin to adopt it, the more successful they're going to be. And I think that we all struggle with those particular issues. Wendy, let's get your thoughts on that. I mean, you're coming from the perspective of similar to myself, as kind of a practitioner and educator in this particular space. When you sit back and you look at the clients that you've worked with, these amazing companies, what are you seeing right now in terms of why don't salespeople become as proficient as we need them to be?
And I would echo what Brian and Jason have said, and really say that in my experience, what we see often is the training lacks sustainability and pull through. So it's really important to have frontline managers be able to be there and inspect and coach. But also sometimes the pieces of the puzzle don't come together. And that's where I think the simulations are great in activating the behavioral application. But the failures are usually, it's seen as a one and done, and there is not accountability to pull this through and sustain it.
Yeah, I think that that sustainability is just a constant battle. It really is. Well, guys, I really appreciate your insights on this. Let's go ahead. Let's kind of continue on here. I mean, we just heard our panelists kind of talk about some of the challenges of why aren't our salespeople as proficient around all of this stuff that we teach them. And we can't forgive the sales managers, but we all know that sales managers don't coach as often or as well as we need them to be. We need to continue to support our managers, to Brian's point, to Jason's point, that we need to let these managers be responsible and hold these people accountable for the learning that we provide. But if, in fact, it's true that they're not coaching as often or as well as we should, we have to ask ourselves this question. And being responsible for learning, how can we bring it all together to make it work? I mean, we are ultimately responsible for bringing proper training and proper business outcomes to the organization. Now, granted, we may not have the responsibility of actually driving proficiency, but we have to own that to some regard. Well, let's take a look at how competitive simulations might actually play a role here. Well, let's kind of talk about what simulations are versus are not. First thing is that simulations are not role plays. I mean, how many of us have actually participated in role plays, and we find that they are rather contrived. They're artificial. They're dreaded by salespeople. They're often forgettable or prescriptive. We've heard the word exaggerated or one-off. The reality of it is that role plays might still have a place in training. We don't disagree with that. But we need to really help understand that when we're talking about competitive simulations, role plays might be a part of a competitive simulation, but they are not a competitive simulation. When we're talking about competitive simulations, what we're talking about are things to which get people up and out of their seats, things to which span the entire part of a sales process, not just that client interaction. If we stop for a moment and think about all of the responsibilities that a salesperson has to do to be successful in the field, it's more than just talking to the client. That might be an important part, and that's the reasons why maybe role plays should have a part, should be considered an element in a competitive simulation. But think about all of the other stuff that they need to do. They need to think critically. They need to know how to engage with their peers. They need to think about what part of the account management of my team today struggles most. What do I need to do about kind of bringing them on board? We need to simulate the realities of what these sales representatives actually do in the field. And in order to do that, they need to be kind of entered into this immersive, real world. It needs to be interactive. It needs to be consequential. So when they make decisions, just like they do in real life, there are some positive consequences and some negative consequences. But they have to address those. They have to figure it all out. So competitive simulations truly provide a realistic type of learning opportunity. They're not rote. They're highly engaging. They're energizing. They're memorable. But most importantly than all of this is the fact that they get the opportunity to share peer-to-peer knowledge. Think about the best of the best that you have in your company today. How are you leveraging their experience, their knowledge? Most clients that I've worked with in the past leverage that knowledge by putting them up in front of a group of people and say, talk to them. And so they kind of talk really more at them, but they never really get a chance to see, how does this individual think? So allowing these successful peers to participate in an engaging simulation where everybody can kind of watch them in action is just an unforgettable moment. So let's talk just a little bit about how simulations can actually be used. We're going to pull in our panelists here in just a moment. Let's think about the strategic intent of competitive simulations. In other words, why are simulations being used today and how are they being used? Well, in some cases, they're being used to integrate skills and knowledge and process. You know, I really appreciated the client at L10 that says, you know, one of the nice things about Ignite Selling is that they are a sales training integrator. They bring in all the skills, knowledge, and process that we've thrown at our sales team and help them kind of pull it all together in a useful manner. Another way is that it helps reinforce whatever particular product knowledge or selling skills. You know, there's no sense in just throwing away the investment that you've made in a particular sales training methodology just because you don't feel as if you're getting traction. Maybe you're not getting traction because it really wasn't integrated into the sales organization in the most effective manner. Other ways is that you can use simulations for new product launches, or teach people how to sell more in a team, or to cross-sell, improving cross-selling. How many of us have had a part of our company be acquired by another division or another team? Helps us kind of help formulate new competitive strategies, driving a new process, measuring proficiencies, improving account management, or helping improve leadership effectiveness. Let's get some thoughts from our panelists here. Each of you guys have kind of participated in an Ignite Selling competitive simulation. Can you talk to, Brian, I'll start with you on this one. Brian, can you talk to what was the strategic intent of the competitive simulations that you've been part of in the past, and why was that chosen?
Yeah, you bet. In 2016, we had a key competitive device that was in the process of being pulled from the market, and this device represented about a $40 million, it was a pretty significant opportunity for our business. The strategic intent of our competitive simulation was really to make sure that our sales team and our frontline managers were fully prepared for a discussion that they really weren't accustomed to having. And as we really spent time developing this competitive situation, it was very important to the leadership team that our reps and our frontline managers recognized that these accounts and these doctors, they were not our current customers prior to this withdrawal from the market. And, you know, they were frankly being told that they couldn't use probably a preferred product. So our goal, Steve, was really to be very customer focused and humble through that process. How we prepared our sales team to navigate that initial discussion was just so critical to the long-term pull-through of the product conversion, and ultimately how we go about keeping a loyal customer. So at the end of the day, this competitive simulation really helped us navigate this unique discussion for us and set us up for success. And it gave the reps the ability to mess up in front of other reps instead of the potential customers.
Yeah, I remember that engagement, Brian, and you know, you guys at the organization we were at the time had implemented Challenger. And now here's an ideal time. If there's a particular skill set that needs to be taught, how do you reapply a methodology or a skill set against a new backdrop? So a competitor was being pulled from the marketplace. You guys had a very short window to try to capture as much of that market share as you possibly could before other competitors gobbled it up. So we had to, you know, you mentioned earlier about the importance of speed to adoption and absorption. You know, so we had a very short window there. Do you recall, Brian, what the actual percentages was that you captured as a result of your teams kind of being intelligent and simply putting a plan in place, saying, instead of just go get it, boys, you know, we actually put together a plan that simply says, let's be smart about this. How much of that 40 million do you guys actually capture? Do you recall?
I do, yeah. So we captured approximately 28 million of it, which translated to about 70% of the market, which was significant for us at the time because these were users that we have tried for years to bring over and just couldn't. So to capture a 70% market share of that was a significant win.
It was a really big win. There's no doubt about it. It's unfortunate many organizations in your situation probably would just say, you know, kiss them on the cheek, give them a brain shark, and simply saying, hey, here's our opportunity, guys. You know, let's go after the accounts who are currently using this competitive piece of equipment. You guys were much smarter than that, and you said, okay, we need to make sure our team probably knows how to use the skills that we've already taught them, but against one after that. Jason, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Jason, let's talk about some of the initiatives that you guys did. Do you recall, what was the strategic intent of the competitive simulation that your team went through, and why was that chosen?
Sure. For us, Steve, I mean, this was the shift this was a commercial transformation, right? This was going from farming to hunting for us. And in an install-based business, that's a big shift, right? You know, we really had to look at what does it take to sell, what does it mean to sell strategically, plan strategically. We knew that better conversations were not going to get us there. We had to think about and help our reps think more strategically and plan as such, and understand what criteria should they evaluate their opportunities by, right? This for us was really hitting the reset button. You know, we had to go rep by rep, roll up our sleeves, identify the opportunities. How do we move the ball forward so they can shift from farm to hunt? And, you know, what we found is that with every team, every zone, every geography, we had some real champions that adopted the methodology. And those folks won big, and we won big. In that it was really our biggest competitive conversion year on record after we implemented some of these techniques.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that, you know, working with you guys, it was really all about kind of going after that competitive conversion, getting that win back, you know, where you had the business that was then taken away from you, and how do you actually kind of go get that back? And in your particular case, what was interesting is that we were the ones who were responsible for kind of teaching your people about how to strategically analyze an opportunity. But giving them the set of skills and a set of tools just wasn't really going to get them there. That's just not enough. So I appreciate what you just said there.
This was about prioritization. Yeah. I would just add, I mean, this really helped us prioritize. You take a whole install base of opportunity. Where do you go? Where do you start? Right? And thinking about it much more strategically helped the team really focus in on their best opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, how often does it, Jason, that when, you know, you've been part of training initiatives in the past, we give them a set of skills and we just simply say, go use them. Go use them where? With whom? How? You know, and one of the big ahas that I think we got from working with you guys is the fact that, that targeted approach, putting a laser focus with that team that simply says, we need you to go after this subset of customers with this particular set of tools and to use it in this particular manner, and then give them the opportunity to practice it in the simulation so they can have their mistakes. Do you recall what the results were? You said that you had a great year as a result of that. Do you recall any of the quantifiable numbers that you could share?
I did dig it up. We converted about $65 million of competitive conversions that year, and that was really, this was a big piece of us communicating and demonstrating to our salespeople that we were committed. This is a commitment from our business to this style of business, and this is a commitment to them to develop them to be successful.
Jason, up to that point in time, how many years have you had prior to that where you've actually converted $65 million worth of kind of win-back business?
No, that was the high watermark, hands down.
Yeah. So I think that what you're sharing there is it's not just about the skills, but it's really about providing them in an environment to which they can actually apply it and target it in the right direction. Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate that. Wendy, again, from your perspective, Wendy, when you sit back and you think about the clients and that you work with today, particularly that pharmaceutical space today, what kind of strategic intents do you foresee this pharmaceutical market adopting as a way to use competitive simulations?
So much of what we've been hearing about from Brian and Jason still applies very much for pharma, but where I think there's a huge opportunity, which is why we're really collaborating, is that I believe that the simulations can really help with cracking the code and understanding account management. Particularly, we know that there are so many people that are parts of accounts teams and many different customer-facing roles, from reps to MSLs to field-based HEOR to reimbursement, and they struggle on two levels. One is, how do they work together and collaborate and communicate to crack the code against their accounts? And I think simulations are a terrific way to activate that and let them work out the kinks. And the second piece is, much of what pharmaceutical organizations and biotechs and devices, they're working in these complex integrated delivery networks. So to connect the dots as to, do you approach pharmacy first? Do you go to the financial officer? How that all works, this really helps. And I really believe that using the simulations from an account team effectiveness and connecting those dots is going to be helpful tremendously in sort of moving the needle and making some performance gaps close, very much so.
Well, I can't agree with you more, Wendy. I think that we've already started to see, just in some of the preliminary conversations we're having with some of these top pharma companies today, this notion of account management is a very serious issue where they have to manage so many people that are part of their team in an effective way that kind of helps them integrate with their customer in a more effective way. There's so many different moving pieces on both sides of the table, and these account managers are the quarterback, and they need to be able to kind of crack the code, as you said, to try to figure out what to do. And I do foresee simulations being a great way to put them into that realistic environment that simply says, let's try to figure this out as a team, guys, and put them into that space. So thanks for your insights, Wendy.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of continue on here as we start, kind of go to our next section here. We have to start thinking about, why should you consider using them? You've heard from our panelists today as to how they've been able to use simulations and why they're using them. But let's kind of talk just a little bit more about kind of the value of simulations. I mean, interestingly enough, you just heard Wendy talk about driving stronger collaboration between teams. She was using it in the context of account management, but there's no doubt about that. Reducing post-merger integration problems. I mean, I stated earlier in this webinar that, sometimes we're part of companies that were part of a merger and acquisition, and getting those teams to kind of cross-sell or get them to start working together, start leveraging context inside the account is sometimes really important. The other one is just think about it just for a moment. This goes back kind of to Brian's comment about ramp-up speed, reducing ramp-up for new hires. One of the things we've been able to do is we've proven that with one particular client anyway, we've reduced their ramp to revenue, which is how long does it take somebody to become fully proficient on the job to where they're producing enough revenue to cover their cost. And we were able to reduce that by 6 months. But that's about that absorption rate, that ability to take new skills and new knowledge and process and use it in a proper way that drives sales results. And simulations can help in that regard. Improving a common language across functionalities. I mean, implementing a sales methodology is often done to create a common language. But if it's never really adopted, that language is never really becoming a common language. That's become somewhat of a problem. In addition to that, it's about revenue gains. This particular example is a real example where we captured $11 million in new revenue in 9 months solely because we put focus, similar to what you heard Jason say. In this particular case, it was a new product launch. But listen to what Jason said. Revenue gains us $65 million in just competitive revenue, win-back revenue, because they simply put a very strategic focus on a set of tools and a simulation to drive those tools. It's about simply providing realistic and realism to the learning. And then improved application of skills. I mean, let's just face it. Think about, as I stated earlier, how much skills, how many different skill programs have your sales reps been through? Online learning, kind of brain sharks, classroom learning, field training, coaching. How much knowledge have you given them? How many online, knowledge modules have they had to go through? What about your process, your Salesforce.com? What's the adoption of Salesforce.com? Simulations are extremely valuable to help drive skill application, knowledge and process application. They're absolutely terrific areas. I'd like to see if I can get these panelists just to talk just a little bit about kind of the short-term and long-term gains you experienced. I know I kind of asked you the question. I may have kind of asked you this question in our last question. I apologize. But if you can think, let's start with you, Jason, on this one. If you sit back and you think about the short-term and long-term gains that you experienced as a result of implementing a simulation, let's just suppose for a moment that the short-term gain was that $65 million. What was the long-term gain that you experienced?
Well, as I mentioned, we had a new team, Steve. We had new managers. We had some new salespeople. And so, as you somewhat alluded to, this gave us that common language by which we could really evaluate and coach our team. I mean, salespeople come and go, but this was the go-to methodology for us. This set the focus as our strategic approach. So when you think about sales in general, it's all about hitting the number and the target, but this was about the how. How are we going to do it? How are we going to evaluate our team in a very complex marketplace, long sales cycles to achieve the metrics? And ultimately, I think the long-term, benefit was that we really raised the bar from a management perspective and from a seller perspective on what it meant to be a seller for Siemens Healthcare. And we had a common methodology by which we could evaluate it.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I mean, it's been a few years now since we've implemented this, but what's interesting is that I still hear from some of your managers today kind of looking for advice and trying to figure out how can they continue to drive utilization amongst their own team. Obviously, the impact that we had with some of those managers, clearly there's a one-to-one correlation that simply says if you kind of learn how to adopt the process and the skills and the tools that were taught, you're going to have better results. And so, it's nice to see your managers still kind of coming back and looking for that kind of support. Brian, what about yourself? Brian, when you sit back and you think about the short-term gains, you said you won that economically there's a $28 million windfall here. But when you step back and you think about the use of the simulations, your company has actually done multiple simulations with us for different types of applications where we're not teaching any new skills, but we're driving applications of the skills and the knowledge that they've already been taught. What do you think some of the long-term gains your company has experienced as a result of wanting to use simulations? What do you think we're seeing in the field and from a manager's and sales rep standpoint?
Yeah, so these long-term sort of competitive simulations, they really gave us the building blocks to think broadly about our business and identify things that are going great and potential concerns that we have that we need to get out in front of. And that's what these competitive simulations do. But it's sort of this, it gives us the building block of these between sales and sales training, the collaboration between those two. But something, Steve, was pretty interesting that also happened when we were successful through this simulation and we executed right through the revenue, the opportunity that was out there and the revenue that happened. What was really interesting that we didn't anticipate was that the engagement of our reps and our managers accelerated. So when you think about, like, we track that within our company, right? We metric engagement. That year, that 2016 year, we led the way with our company when it came to engagement. And, you know, I don't think I'm stretching to say that successfully implementing this and the results that ended up being the impact of it really impacted our business beyond just the dollars and cents. It impacted the engagement and the culture of our company.
Wow, that speaks volumes. Really does speak volumes to the power of simply engaging people into the learning experience. And that engagement obviously comes from simply participating, building something that is realistic, something that they can apply and understand in real time. So I really appreciate your comments there. Wendy, you know, we're still early in developing some of these simulations for the market, some of the clients right now. Can you talk to just a little bit about what the anticipated outcomes are that the clients that you're talking to, they want to implement the simulation. What are they hoping to gain as a result of that?
They're absolutely looking to gain the ability to navigate these IDNs. So one of the key metrics is really customer experience, right? And having those meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
And a lot of the organizations are struggling because, quite frankly, they're angering many of their customers, because so many people are stepping on each other's toe within the healthcare system. So they're really hoping to be able to have them work better together, identify swim lanes, and they quantify that in, you know, millions and millions of dollars, you know, when you think about account teams. And the other piece they're looking to really drive and activate the skills so they're better at uncovering the needs, so then they can bring solutions forward. So there is really high expectations around how the account management simulations, both versions, will really help them with working with their customer-facing teams.
Wow. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be able to drive those kinds of results, because the application of the simulation that we're talking about here for your clients is exactly the beautiful fit for those simulations. Well, guys, before we say goodbye here, let's see if there's any questions that might have come from anybody that's participating in this simulation today. Participating in this webinar today. Tim, let me turn this over to you, and can you tell me, are there any questions for the panelists or for myself?
Well, thank you, Steve, and that was a great presentation. Thank you, and thank you, everybody on the panel. We do have a question, and I apologize to the person who asked this. I probably should have brought this out earlier. But one of our attendees is asking, could you define what a competitive simulation is exactly and what that entails?
Sure. When we're talking about a competitive simulation, we are speaking specifically of a classroom experience, a simulation that is a full immersion classroom experience to which we customize the world to which they operate in. So we might be creating an entire IDN. If you're in the healthcare space, we could be creating a bank. If you guys are selling into the financial market space, or maybe we've created a grocery food store, as we've done for other clients. But we create the website, the economics, the characters, and we do it in a way that is designed to drive a very specific strategic intent. If, in fact, the intent of the simulation is to engage the client in a new particular product, well, then we're going to go ahead and provide an opportunity for the sales representatives to operate in that world. So the account that we create will have will open the door for an opportunity there, or maybe we'll simply say there is no opportunity here. Your job is to go find it. But simulations can be written to serve any part of that sales process. We've created simulations that help people prospect better, to launch new products, to engage clients, to think strategically, to negotiate, to present, to implement. We've developed a simulation that focuses, you won the business. Now what do you do? So, but these are a classroom learning experience. So where we kind of take over a hotel, it incorporates emails and phone calls, and there's a lot of different kind of elements that we can go ahead and incorporate that. Some of them are face-to-face meetings, some of them don't have face-to-face meetings. But that's what we're talking about, Tim. So I hope that I was able to answer the question for that particular person.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah. Folks, if you do have any additional questions for Steve or any of the panelists, feel free to send those in right now. I do have some questions here queued up, but we have some time, so keep them coming, please. This is a question aimed towards Brian. Brian, do you think role plays are still necessary, or will you only use competitive simulations going forward?
Yeah, great question. As much as my reps would love to hear that role plays are no longer going to happen, I think they're always going to have a place in sales training. They define a prescriptive and a predictable approach to sales, and they're especially helpful with sort of baseline objection handling. So we're always going to have those. I think competitive simulations go a bit further, and they prepare the sales professional to overcome these curveballs, right, that always come in the sales process. And in my opinion, the competitive simulations are absolutely where the real world training takes place. But short answer there is that no, there will always be a place for role plays in the market.
Excellent, thank you. Not sure if we're getting any sort of responses on the always be a place for role play or not, but it's good to know. Yeah, another question coming in. Steve, let me direct this one to you. How do you simulate changes? This is for Cheryl, one of our audience members. How do you simulate changes in the marketplace?
Well, that's a great question, Cheryl. I think that, the beauty about a simulation is that they actually can turn on a dime. But one of the things that we often do is we try to simulate how to help salespeople adapt to the changes in the marketplace. One of the things that recently has happened in the medical device space is this influx of ACOs, the accountable care organizations. And that's a shift in the marketplace. Hospitals are now being held accountable for particular metrics, and if they hit those particular metrics, they get higher levels of reimbursement. But sales representatives needed to understand what does that mean to them? And so it wasn't about learning new skills. It was about taking a new piece of knowledge and learning how do I apply this new piece of knowledge to what I already know. So simulations actually are written. Each one is written unique to the client that we're working with to help the sales organization adapt and modify their sales approach to whatever the market challenge might be. So they're very adaptable. In some cases, we'll actually go down a particular path, write the simulation, and then something is even as simple as a product recall. We've been doing simulations in the past where the week prior to the launch, there was a product recall. Well, that's a market shift, and it might be significant or insignificant depending upon the market that you're in. But if it's a major competitor has a product recall, well, what do? Well, we don't abandon the simulation we've already written. We simply just incorporate that right into the storyline. We simply now we'll have a particular part of the strategy simply says, hey, you've just read in the paper that there was a product recall. How does this help you, or how does it hurt you? So the beauty of the simulations is that they can turn on a dime. They're very adaptable. I hope that answered your question, Cheryl.
Tim? Thank you. Very good answer. I have a question here for Jason. Jason, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I saw it looked like you had some phone difficulties there. So, Jason, question for you. Other than using a simulation to drive the application of your new strategic planning tools, do you see other applications for competitive simulations within Siemens?
Yeah, Tim, I think, the example I provided was very macro, with the simulation we did with Steve and the team. I see us moving a little bit more micro. We've demonstrated how we can shift, behavior with the simulations. But in our industry, the purchasing process for our products, it just continues to require more and more customization. It's become very prescriptive in the approach we have to take. So I see these being functional and helping us get more acute in how we expand, articulate our value proposition in the face of a lot of these objections that we're seeing today that we were not seeing as recently as 3 years ago. So that may sound like a very a laser-focused issue, but for us to advance the sale of a complex solution and a high-ticket solution, these are the kind of things we have to do in the competitive simulation and so forth, help our reps get comfortable having those discussions. So we can identify all kinds of ways to do that. There's many, many solutions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Wendy, I have a question for you as well. How do you see simulations playing a role to improve account management?
To recap, I think that the account management simulations will help foster account team effectiveness, collaboration, coordination, and will also help for sales professionals and all customer-facing roles really connect those dots in the integrated delivery networks. So that will be a way to really activate all their learning, but really help them from real-time planning as well. So they get the learning experience, but then they can actually plan and execute against the business.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Steve, it looks like we're getting near the top of the hour. It looks like I have time for one last question. I'm going to direct that to you, but of course any of the panelists can jump in as well on this. Everyone's talked about the manager's role in coaching reps. Do managers participate in a simulation?
Managers must play a role in the simulation, but the best way to answer the question is, do your managers play a role in the sales process today? Obviously, the answer to that question is yes. So if, in fact, we're simulating what real sales representatives are supposed to be doing out in the field, and their manager plays a role there, yes, we would incorporate the manager into that simulation as well. The nice thing about a simulation is that not only it provides managers the opportunity to play a role in the simulation, maybe as a customer potentially, I prefer to see managers play a role in the simulation that simulates their real job. So when we implement simulations, we actually strongly encourage our clients to allow the managers to be part of the strategic thinking process. Let them listen into how their reps are thinking. Let them kind of ask questions that challenges their team's thinking. Let them be a fly on the wall during a sales call, because they can't be in on a lot of sales calls in many cases. They're out in the field maybe once every 2 to 8 weeks. Here's an opportunity to listen to a number of sales calls. Be a fly on the wall. Maybe you want the simulation, you want to bring the manager with you. Let the manager kind of participate in the sales call. Let the manager coach after the sales call. Let them provide feedback. So we fully encourage managers to participate in a very strong way. But that is written into the simulation specifically about what do we want them to do. It's a beautiful double-edged sword where it can kind of cut through things that have sales representatives be successful, but also provides opportunities for managers to learn and reinforce the coaching skills, the coaching models that they've been given. So I'll stop there for the top of the hour, but yes, we do strongly encourage managers to play a role.
Excellent. Thank you. Great answer. And great presentation. We are at the top of the hour, like you said, so let me go ahead and close things down. But I wanted to make sure you saw that our sponsors today, Ignite Selling and WLH Consulting, have both shared their websites, email addresses, and phone numbers here. Obviously, if you have any additional questions we did not get to today, I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you with those. You can also reach out through us, too, and we can connect you with any of the speakers or presenters on today's program. Steve, let me thank you and the panelists, and feel free to jump in on this if you'd like. A great presentation today.
Well, thank you, Tim. I really appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to speak to your attendees here at L10, members of L10. And Brian and Jason and Wendy, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and to provide everybody on this webinar and everybody who's going to be recording and listening to this, downloading this and listening to this, the opportunity to hear your thoughts, hear your insights. So again, I want to thank you all for actually taking up your time and sharing your insights with everybody that's on this participating in this webinar. So Jason, Brian, and Wendy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Tim.
Well, just in closing, I thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close out now, Steve, and again, great job to all the panelists and to yourself as well. Just as we close out, folks, just want to leave you with some upcoming information. This is the L10 calendar of events, a work in progress, so always feel free to check back at the L-10.org website for more information. You can see some of the upcoming events, our Networking After Work mixers, certificate programs, next year's annual conference, and our next webinar is going to be Friday, July 13th. We'll be talking about sharing solutions from the 47th L10 Annual Conference. We're going to share with you some presentations, some shortened versions of some of the popular presentations at our conference workshops. So we hope you can join us for that. You can register or find out more information at any of our programs at this address. And again, we're going to send you an email in about 1 hour with a link to the recording of today's webinar. We'll also be posted even sooner than that to this address here, l-10.org/webinars on demand. And finally, my email address is here at the bottom of the screen. Again, if I can help you with anything around these webinars or your L10 membership, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. So with that said, I'm going to thank our sponsors again, Ignite Selling and WLH Consulting. And I'm going to thank our speakers, Steve Gilda, Wendy Heckelman, Brian Ferrara, and Jason Ray. And most of all, I'm going to thank everybody out there in the audience for your time, attention, participation, and questions on today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you back here on July 13th. In the meantime, let me wish you a good rest of your week, a good July 4th holiday, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.